thanks to everybody who contacted me about the last time that I did this, and it looks like people actually do watch these, so I'm excited about that. We'll start with the place where I left off last time, which is celebrity autobiography, and some recommendations here in our collection. Carol Burnett's memoir of Carrie and Me, which is, if you remember her daughter Carrie, she was on the television show Fame. She also did some television acting in the late 80s, early 90s. It's all about her struggles and her relationship with Carol Burnett. And at the end of the book, it is the unfinished novel that she had written that she wanted Carol to finish when she passed away. It's moving. It's a quick read. If you're looking for something that will surprise you, I think this is a really, really good book, and I would recommend that one. That's called Carrie and Me by Carol Burnett. Shirley Jones has written a book, Mrs. Partridge, Naughty Naughty. Lots of stuff in here that I didn't know about Shirley Jones. Didn't really think about Shirley Jones, but she wanted you to know all of this stuff. So it is graphic in some detail. It talks a lot about her relationship with Jack Cassidy, and really he was the love of her life, even though she's been married to Marty Ingalls for a lot longer. But she talks about him, she talks about her relationship with her 4 sons, and she includes David Cassidy as her son, even though he has another mother. And she talks a lot about the business. And if you're interested in hearing about Oscar Hammerstein and Richard Rodgers and that whole musical era, it's a really good read. Also about her early upbringing and living in Pennsylvania. I was really fascinated by her. So, Shirley Jones. And then we have Burt Bacharach. He's one of the most obnoxious people on the face of the earth, just my opinion, but his book is really good because he actually kind of puts it to himself and says, you know, I screwed up here, I screwed up here, I screwed up here, and I'm still arrogant. But it's a good read, and it was a fast read for me, and a lot of issues with his personal life that he tried to address, and yet he let his former wives talk in this book too. So you'll hear from Angie Dickinson and Carol Bayer-Sager and about some things that they differ in his opinions. So I thought that was pretty brave of him to do that. And, you know, Burt Bacharach, you know, an arrogant guy that he is, he still is one of the greatest composers that we had in the last half of the 20th century. So I would recommend it. It's a good read. Now, in the nonfiction area, and this is famous. I'm going to do some, we have a plethora of documentaries right now that are really, really good that we have. And I would love to have shown you the Paul Williams, whatever became of Paul Williams, or Evocator, the Mort Downey Jr. story, but they're checked out right now, which is a good thing. But if you see those on the new nonfiction DVD shelf, do check those out. They're both really, really excellent. But here's one about The Great Gatsby. You can go, oh, Gatsby, we're over Gatsby. This is actually about F. Scott Fitzgerald and his life and the times that the Gatsby was written in and what happened to him. Because as we hit the 75th anniversary of Gatsby, the actual book, there is a book called The Great Gatsby, just in case you didn't know that. Anyway, as we hit the 75th anniversary of that, not too much talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald, who's as fascinating as Jay Gatsby, in my opinion, and interesting because they also talk about Zelda Fitzgerald and Scotty Fitzgerald, who is the daughter, who a lot of people forgot about, but interesting documentary. But again, we have a ton of new documentaries in the nonfiction section that are really, really good. So advice books. Advice books are good. Sometimes they're not, but this one is really funny. Earlier this year, Lonnie Love was in Iowa City. She performed at the First Avenue Club. You may know her from Chelsea lately. You may know her from other places where she's shown up and given her opinion. She's written an advice book, and it's actually very, very funny. And just like her, it makes you think a little bit about what she's saying. She's funny as she says it, but it makes you think. I enjoyed this quite a bit, and she's got some interesting advice for women. And it's called Love Him, Leave Him, but Don't Get Stuck with a Tab, which, you know, advice we could all take. Probably the best nonfiction book of this summer was the Astronaut's Wives Club. This is about the story of the Mercury 7 astronauts' wives. And they were as famous as their husbands. And the husbands, you know, The Right Stuff was published about them. They've all written autobiographies. I think the only person now left is John Glenn. And you just, okay, there's the testosterone. But this is about the women and what happened to them. And with the exception of John Glenn, these guys were really kind of cowboys and not too stuck on the family unit, even though Life magazine would like you to think they were lovely family men. It's very fascinating to find out what happens to all of these women. It also talks about the Apollo astronauts' wives and how interesting their lives are too, because they didn't get the attention that the Mercury wives did as much, and or as if one of the ships failed or if there was a mission that was aborted, they didn't get to go to the White House and meet the First Lady. And so it's an interesting thing of what fame does to normal people. And the most fascinating person in here is Betty Grisham, who was Gus Grisham's widow. He died in the first Apollo accident. And she really had to struggle to get any kind of recognition for him. So it's an interesting read. It's probably the best nonfiction book from last summer. Okay, so cookbooks. We have a ton of them too. I was going to get the Gordon Ramsay book, but I got checked out too. But this is Michael Cirillo. I know I probably didn't pronounce it right, but it doesn't matter. He won Top Chef Masters. He's been on TV all the time. He's had TV shows on PBS. You will recognize him. This is a really nice book. It's called Live Fire. It's about grilling. He owns a winery out in Napa. He owns several restaurants in California. He knows his stuff. You know, he's also very personable, and he talks to you as if you were on his level as a cook, and I think that's important. But I would recommend that. Okay, Iowa City Public Library has a special relationship with the film director Henry Jaglom. We have been getting his films for years and years and years. Through his distribution. He's an independent filmmaker. He's been around since the 60s. He's now in his, I think he's entering his 80s right now. He's got a lot of Hollywood under his belt. But one of the relationships that he fostered over the years was his relationship with Orson Welles. In the movie Somebody to Love, Orson Welles gave his last film appearance, and it was as a favor to Jaglom. There's now a book about My Lunch with Orson, and that's written by Peter Biskind, I think is the name. And Henry Jaglom recorded his lunches with Orson Welles for the last 3 years of Orson's life. And it's very fascinating because Orson Welles was really catty. And he wasn't bitter as much as he was just realistic. And he talks about his marriage with Rita Hayworth, and he talks about Hollywood, and he talks about being outcast, and he talks about all kinds of people and things, and it's really fascinating. If you're interested in Hollywood, it's really, really cool. A little trivia about Orson Welles. He recorded an interview with Merv Griffin the night he died, and after that interview, he went to the famous Pink's hot dog stand and ordered a dozen hot dogs, went home, and dropped dead. Just thought I'd throw that in as a little trivia. We also have, like I said, a lot of films from Henry Jaglom. This is Festival in Venice, or Festival in Cannes. And again, Jaglom is a quirky filmmaker. He's very talky films, but I've always enjoyed him. I really like him. I like him as a person a great deal. I've talked to him on the phone a couple times, and he's just absolutely hilarious. Okay, so last, we're going to talk about a television show that nobody watches, but it is probably the best television show on TV. It's an AMC show, which is high quality. If you say AMC, oh, you think Mad Men or that Breaking Bad show that I guess just went off the air. This is Hell on Wheels, and this is about the building of the Intercontinental Railroad. And it's also about, I call it an existential Western because it's about Colin Buchanan. This is the guy on here. And he was a Confederate soldier, went off, did his duty. He was from Mississippi, came home, found out that his wife and his son were murdered. And he's seeking revenge on the people that, vengeance on the people that murdered his family. It is very fascinating in the sense that it's about the building of the railroad too, because he eventually finds out that most of the soldiers and freedmen went to work on the Transcontinental Railroad, as opposed to the Pacific Union, which is, everybody thinks it's Chinese people, Chinese immigrants built that, but Transcontinental was built by freedmen, former soldiers, and Irish immigrants. And so the series has evolved from one of vengeance and revenge to building the railroad and how that is happening. Lots of violence. It's graphic in that. If you're squeamish about violence, you probably don't want to watch this, but it is truly a fascinating show. It just finished its 3rd season on AMC. I hope that everybody watches it, and when the 3rd season comes out, we have the first 2 seasons here at the library, and I noticed that people are starting to check it out. So I only had 1 copy on the shelf, and I was glad there was one today when I put to pull it. But anyway, Hell on Wheels. Check it out. The first 2 seasons, 3rd season should be available on DVD by the beginning of the year. And that's it.